Good evening. The April 23rd, 2020 Board of Directors meeting is now being called to order at 6:05. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under
God, indivisible, with justice
liberty
for all.
Thank you. All right. Let's have the roll call. I'm going to call each board member, and if you can say present via the call-in, that'd be helpful, please. Scott D. Philippus.
Present via the call-in.
Melanie Palmer.
Present via the call-in.
Al Roper.
Present via the call-in.
Ron Spooner.
Present via the call-in.
Bill Tubb.
Present via the call-in.
And Don Wells.
Present via the call-in.
All right, so all are present. General Manager Evans, can you confirm the proof of notice, please?
Yes, notice was provided.
All right, super, thank you. And we have quorum. Do you want to comment on the residents' comments on the agenda topics?
Yes, we had one person asked to comment on agenda items. That person emailed his question in. It is Ted Durr. Ted's email reads, nowhere on your agenda in any discussion reopening Sandoval's amenities. My feeling is the board should invest in 2 or 3 thermometers and measure everyone's temperature via the forehead if and when they want to attend an activity. Just like many places do already, whenever someone comes to an activity like the pool, pickleball, cards, meeting, bocce, etc., they get tested first for fever. I personally check my temperature frequently as I am in the high-risk category. These devices are on Amazon costing between $80 and $200 each. Should they have a fever, no admittance. We need to protect everyone as best we can. Not perfect, but reassuring, I think. Ask the 3 questions all doctors ask now. Also, please outline the board's procedures to sanitize and ensure for the safety of all residents and their guests, even if we allow guests. Thank you. So this is on our agenda, and we will take that into consideration a little later on when we discuss that agenda item.
Perfect. Good, thank you. Next on the agenda is the need to approve the past meeting minutes. Does anyone?
I have a correction.
I do too. Maybe it's the same one.
On the February 27th meeting on new business for April board meeting, we voted to meet on April 22nd. This is April 23rd, so obviously we did not follow our motion.
Yeah, I had that flagged as well. Thank you.
I'm thinking that the meeting minutes, the meeting minutes are correct, but we just changed what our plans were. In the meeting, we actually were going to meet on the 22nd, but because of the coronavirus, I actually had international travel, which was the reason of to push it up one day. And because of the coronavirus, my travel plans were canceled, and thus we're meeting on the 23rd. So I think the meeting minutes in that regard are correct.
The circumstances changed.
That's correct. Don?
Yes, under the general manager's report, paragraph number 3, Melanie Palmer seconded the motion. These minutes were before Melanie was elected to the board.
Thank you.
Good catch.
All right, any other changes or updates?
Do you know who was this person that seconded that motion?
I will have to go to my notes. I apologize.
Oh, maybe it was Marilyn.
I think it probably was, yeah.
All right. Any other changes? I'm sorry, any other changes? Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve. Motion to approve as amended.
Don Wells made the motion. Do we have a second?
A second, Melanie.
All right, Melanie. Okay, so accepted as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, great, thank you. Next on the agenda is the board president's report. So I want to just, again, say good evening to everybody and welcome you all to this virtual HOA board meeting. It's a first, and it's really awkward sitting here talking to an empty room. But please bear with us as we work through both the agenda and the technology. Tonight is my first opportunity to speak to the residents. It is an honor to serve as board president. Of course, I wish we were all together. However, we are following our attorney's guidance and moving forward with this virtual meeting. It's crazy to believe 6 weeks have passed since the board election on Thursday, March 12th. This new board met and implemented decisive measures on the very next day to mitigate the spread of the coronavirus within our community in light of the President's declaration of a pandemic national emergency. I trust you are all staying strong throughout this extended time at home and continuing to practice social distancing. During this time, Sandoval's Stay Strong spirit has been on display by inspiring chalk walk drawings, neighbors checking in on one another, making and distributing masks, as well as support offered by our neighborhood liaisons. I look forward to a return to normal operations once the threat of the virus subsides. Your board will continue to monitor and assess the situation going forward. Since this is our first board meeting since the election, I wish to start by thanking our former board members for their contributions. I also want to thank the election committee and volunteers who assisted with counting ballots, as well as thank those who supported and implemented the electronic voting process. During this pandemic shutdown period, our HOA activity there has been HOA activity that's taken place, which I'm sure many of you have noted. I wish to highlight some ongoing activities, such as our common area landscaping in front of the clubhouse, along the new wall, and at the veterans entrance. The addition of the parking lots at the tennis court in Phase 3 dog park and ongoing work there. The installation of the sunshade at the playground. We even had a visit or two by the Easter Bunny. We conducted an after-action discussion with CenturyLink in response to outages and miscommunications. You may have seen that email that was shared today with the designated contact numbers in reporting outages or to troubleshoot issues. We've also solicited volunteer members to serve on our HOA committees. And we've also scheduled a walkthrough of the lake's aeration system. Many of these topics will be further addressed during today's meeting. So let's get down to business now. Thank you. And at this time, I call for the treasurer's report.
Okay. March 31st, financial highlights. Item 1, the association's draft audit report was completed on March 27th, ending year 2019 with a loss of $96,007. The auditor determined that assets totaling $114,273 and reported at the end of fiscal year 2018 as construction in process were indeed worthless and were written off at a loss. B, February 2019 financials have been posted to our homeowners website for your review. We received the March 2019 preliminary financials last evening. Those have been distributed to the board and to the finance committee. Those financials were preliminary as the bank reconciliations for March could not be completed on the operating account. The bank had charged back adjustments of $6,186 to our account without notifying us. This morning, the issue was identified as checks scanned for deposit in the Pope Properties office for deposit on the BB&T scanner, which were illegible, and the bank issued a chargeback. Pope has required the bank to replace the scanner and is redepositing those checks today. Item 2, at March 31, the balances in the reserve fund and telecommunications surplus fund were $2,454,881 and $2,043,952 respectively. Item 3, we contribute $48,802 monthly to our telecommunications fund for a total of $94,084 thus far in 2020. For the next 9 months of 2020, we'll add an additional $403,218 to the fund. We have commitments for projects either planned or in progress of $283,000 and have set a not to exceed clubhouse budget, which includes a contingency of $200,000 of $2,013,000 to come from our telecommunication funds which our construction manager agrees with. This should leave us at December 31, 2020 with approximately $151,000 in the telecommunication fund and a clubhouse expansion ready for CO in early 2021. However, and this is a very big however, with the U.S. government printing $2.7 trillion recently for the COVID-19 stimulus, personally, I expect we will experience inflation, much like we had in Jimmy Carter's years, and inflation could be a concern going forward. Item 4, we had 2 CDs mature in March, but have not reinvested those proceeds as the Mutual of Omaha Bank is changing their investment policy, so currently those are invested in money market funds. Item 5 and final, the board was concerned with cash flow and current homeowner delinquencies. The general manager provided me with the following data. On April 21st, 2019, that's a year ago, we had 126 delinquent accounts and 1,299 homeowners were current. The delinquencies totaled $79,500. On July 21st, 2019, we had 130 delinquent accounts and 1,295 homeowners were current. On October 21st, 2019, we had 112 delinquent accounts and 1,313 homeowners were current. On January 21st, 2020, we had 109 delinquent accounts, 1,316 homeowners were current. On April 21st, 2020, which is the current quarter, we had 112 delinquent accounts and 1,313 homeowners were current. Delinquencies totaled $69,600. So the COVID virus issue has not adversely impacted our cash flows to date. And also in April of 2020, we spent a little over $7,000 in legal fees to record liens on around 20 properties who have been habitually delinquent in hopes of recovering some of those back assessments. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. And now the general manager's report.
Yes, my first thing I want to talk about is staffing. I think everybody in the community realizes this is our 3rd week for working off-site, and it's gone very well. Employees Carol Essig with administrative, Linda Babcock, our reception, myself, are all able to virtually complete and work on all of our assignments as routine from home, obviously without the face-to-face contact, which we miss a lot. Megan, our maintenance technician, is able to continue to work on site in isolation as routine. And Libby, our lifestyle director, is working from home partially and here on site in isolation partially. Libby is helping us during this time perform standard operating procedures as far as memorializing them for every staff person. That helps us tremendously when we have new staff come in. Also, it cross-trains Libby at the same time to learn all other responsibilities. Libby's also coordinating and creating virtual activities for the community. She's also assisting with dog runs, as Megan has had a few days of PTO to handle personal issues related to coronavirus. So Libby's been helpful in that way. She's also planning for future events for the 3rd and 4th quarters, and is also beginning the process of putting her budget together for next year. So again, I believe staff is being able to operate very efficiently, considering we're not on staff, and we're all excited at the potential of getting back here as soon as possible. On amenities, I wanted to start by acknowledging a growing desire to open amenities. And as Kathy mentioned, we're planning the reopening of amenities using a phased approach and in accordance with related governmental guidelines, with safety for all being the primary factor. We'll be discussing this in greater detail later on in the meeting. Last week, I sent out an email soliciting committee members, which I would like to read again for those of you who may not have seen it, or as a reminder. The HOA is beginning the process of soliciting membership for our standing committees. Those of you who served on committees this past year are strongly encouraged to reapply for membership, as we would like to maintain a level of continuity. However, we're also looking for new members who will bring in fresh ideas and perspectives. If you're interested in serving on one of the following standing committees, please email a one-page resume or letter of interest to sandovallgm@popegolf.net no later than Friday, May 1, 2020. Please include your full name, address, email address, and phone number in the information you send us. So the committees we have available are the Amenities Committee, the Architectural Review Committee, the Communications Committee, Covenants Hearing Committee, Finance Committee, Lakes Committee, Landscape Committee, Security Committee, Social Committee, and Risk Management Committee. So the Social Committee and the Risk Management Committee are new for this year. We're very excited. The Social Committee will work very closely with Libby, our Lifestyle Director, in creating diverse activities so everyone in the community can enjoy all of our activities and events. The Risk Management Committee, for those of you who follow the board meetings, you might realize or remember that we had a significant premium increase, so we thought it prudent to form a committee to look at risk management issues as well as review policies existing and those upcoming for renewal. And a huge thank you to all of our 2019 volunteers, and here's hoping you return in 2020. Next topic I wanted to talk about was vehicle traffic. I've had a little bit more than usual emails or phone calls come in the last few weeks regarding speeders in the community, and I think that it's due obviously to a lot more people being home and more families being home and more kids out in the neighborhood playing. So, you know, we obviously all live here together and we need to respect one another. And I think that sometimes, especially during this period, frustrations get high. But I just wanted to take this opportunity to remind people that we do have a lot more children in the community out and about, so please drive slow. Thank you. The other topic I wanted to mention, I sent an email blast out a week or so ago, and it was regarding bicycles and pedestrians walking and riding through vehicle access gates. And I emphasized in the email that I sent out, number one, that all of the pedestrian and bicycle traffic should use the pedestrian gates to the side and not use the vehicle gates. And for example, we have some gates that are very heavy. The Trafalgar gates and the Veterans gates, for instance, are heavy enough to where when they come down and hit the top of a car, I've actually seen pretty significant dents. And if you can only imagine what that could do to someone's head, thank goodness we haven't had a serious injury. However, these gates, these bars that go down are very, very difficult to judge, and they come down quickly. And I cannot tell you how dangerous it is, and the potential of a catastrophic injury is there. So we are strongly asking people to do the right thing and use the pedestrian gates if you're on foot or on a bicycle. Thank you. The other issue I wanted to talk about was security, and it's good news considering all of the people we've had in the community, the kids out of school. We've adjusted security hours in preparation, and it's been very successful. We've had perhaps 2 very minor issues, no vandalism, nothing significant at all. So thus far, we consider it a success. The other thing I wanted to relay to you is a CenturyLink email that I just sent out about 4:15 today, and I wanted to read that to you if you haven't had a chance to see it. It says, on April 16th, the association met in a telephone conference with representatives of CenturyLink to discuss outages throughout the community from Friday, March 27th through Wednesday, April 1st. Our primary objectives were to ensure these outages had been permanently resolved, rectify communication issues many of our residents had with CenturyLink during the outages, and to discuss a credit to Sandoval's account for a disruption of service. Through the course of discussions, we were assured a permanent solution has been implemented with the migration of all residents to CenturyLink's new system. We were also apprised of improved communication protocols detailed further below. Lastly, we are in a continued discussions relating to a credit the association will receive for the disruption of service and should have that wrapped up shortly. Moving forward, residents needing technical support assistance should call CenturyLink's dedicated technical support help desk at 877-720-3416. Residents looking to add or remove services up and beyond the agreement should contact CenturyLink's customer order resolution team at 866-706-4722, Monday through Friday, 9 to 7. It is important to keep in mind that you should only contact these numbers and not CenturyLink's general customer service lines, as these departments are specifically designated to support Sandoval. Residents should simply state they are bulk customers with the Sandoval community and provide their specific address for assistance. If your landline phone services are with CenturyLink, you may reference your home telephone number as well, not your cell phone numbers. CenturyLink's point of contact for Sandoval has also committed to advising me, the GM, of future scheduled maintenance within the community so residents will be aware of possible service disruptions in advance. Lastly, I wanted to thank everyone for their well wishes to myself and all of our staff. Most people say I have a tough job dealing with the political nature of being general manager, as well as a daunting task of making everyone happy. You know that's probably true. However, one of the most regarding aspects of my job is sometimes unexpected appreciation received out of nowhere. A couple of weeks ago, I was out at Veterans Gate in the evening repairing a strike, and a resident rode up on her bike and passed me. Within a minute, she came back and stopped, introduced herself, and said she wanted me to know how much she appreciated me. She then rode off just as quickly. I can't tell you what those words mean to myself and our staff. So thank you again for everyone who has wished us well, especially during the recent coronavirus period. It means a lot to us. And that concludes my report.
All right, thank you. Next, we have the ad hoc committee reports, and I'd like to call upon Ron Spooner to address the clubhouse improvement project.
I believe Don.
Oh,
Wells
Don,
is
I'm
gonna
sorry.
handle that for us.
Don Wells. Pardon
I have
me.
the report. I have the report, and I'm certainly willing to have anyone chime in with something they think that I need to add to what I'm going to say here right now. I know that everyone wants to know if there's been any progress on this project, and the answer is a resounding yes. We held our last formal full committee meeting on March the 11th, one day before the election results. This committee has met with the architect, Tyler Peterson, and the construction manager, Mark Stevens, on several occasions. An extensive survey was sent out to all residents, and we received a healthy response. Utilizing the information received in the survey responses, recommendations were made to include many desires into the concept drawing. These needs were accepted by the architect and incorporated into the plan. Since that time, 3 of your board members have been meeting with the construction manager, the architect, and the civil engineer to put the project in motion. Progress is being made, and we now have a site position for the building and concept drawings. The latest inclusion was to allow the storage shed to remain on the side of the existing building, and both the site plans by Avalon Engineering and the building plans by Tyler Peterson are currently being developed into a former hard copy plan. It is our intent to share all of this information and the plans to all residents once they are complete. Their estimate is that this will occur in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Mark Stevens, our construction manager, has submitted a budget that falls within our project cost with a $200,000 contingency built in, and Bill Tubb mentioned that in his treasurer's report. A couple of highlights include a fitness equipment space equal in size to the original plans. A lounge room and a conference room are both included. The flex space can be divided into thirds, and when the space is fully utilized, it will seat 188 people and table seat 126 comfortably. At the March 11th meeting, it was discussed that the desire of the committee was to provide everyone with a report and status report of the project and the survey. This report is complete, and tonight I would like to ask the board for its permission to have this information published by our communications committee in the next couple of days. That ends my report.
So no.
Thank you, Don. Taylor Morrison litigation?
Can that report go out with the Communications Committee?
Yes.
Now, hold it, I'm against doing that, until we have the
Yeah, let's have
the
discussion.
drawing from Tyler and the elevation. I don't think it's ready to go out, so I think another week or two should be added to the timeline before we send out.
Bill, I'm sorry, this is Scott. I didn't hear your reasoning for holding back on that.
Because we don't have finalized drawings yet, and we're still waiting for an elevation from Tyler so that we'll have a complete set that we can distribute to the homeowners. The engineer has moved the footprint at the last two meetings, and we've had to force him to put it back. So if we distribute something now, that may not be what gets built.
So I heard, and I'm not involved in this, but what I heard Don say is we're at a conceptual point. So, just like anything else, if we're under a conceptual, that means that nothing is in stone. Agreeing or disagreeing with the 1 or 2 week lead time, but if anything is still conceptual, people need to know that this isn't how it's going to look. It's just what we initially have, right?
I'm still of the opinion we should wait a week or two.
I think the report as written shows how the survey was utilized in developing the conceptual plan. If you wait until the plans are all completely in stone, then people can believe you used it, or they can't use it. And I think that was the whole purpose of the survey.
My concern, well, for one thing, if anybody isn't speaking, if they can go on mute, because there's a lot of background noise coming up. But my concern is, if we release these plans, what is the mechanism we have in place to answer questions and be transparent about any concerns or anything that's coming up? Typically what we talked before the last meeting, what was it, the 11th, March 11th, we had the meeting and we were discussing that we were going to release plans and we were going to have like a town hall or a design session where people were going to be able to come and actually see the plans and ask questions, and we're going to have the architect. So that was a forum to be able to address any answers. If we send this out, what is replacing that?
Thank you, Melanie. When anyone else wants to speak, if you could say your name prior to your comment, that would help us. Thank you.
John, are you talking about releasing the plans and the floor plan, or are you talking about only reducing the report that you've made?
Well, there was a conceptual drawings. It showed the seating. It showed the table seating. It was written with Melanie's input with her survey, and it has nothing to do with the site or location of the building.
I still think a 2-week delay until we got to find a more complete drawing from the architect and the engineer is worthwhile, because you're just going to have a lot of questions raised that we can't answer.
Guys, I think we have one of two issues going on. Everybody, one, needs to mute their phones if you're not speaking, and two, you cannot watch the live stream at the same time you're talking or you're getting feedback. Thank you. Okay, I think right now we'll go around and make sure everybody has an opportunity to be heard on this topic. Al, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I guess as long as we stipulate that this is conceptual, that it could change at any time, I would just as soon be in favor of being more transparent and releasing it. I know there have been a lot of questions. People are really wondering what's going on, and I think this would satisfy some of that curiosity.
Ron Spooner?
I think we should hold off until the plans are a little bit more finalized. I'm concerned it will create more questions than answers and possibly put something out there that is inaccurate. And I would also like a type of town hall that we can present this and actually be present with the residents. And I understand we have our limitations right now, but I do expect that sometime in the near future we will be able to do a presentation and answer people's questions rather than just sending it out piecemeal.
Scott?
That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Ron. Scott? Scott DeFilippis?
Scott, you're on mute.
Yeah, I just unmuted myself. Sorry about that. I haven't seen the conceptual drawing so far, so I don't know what that looks like. But, you know, in my previous history, I was part of building committees. We built 3 multi-million-dollar firehouses, and we always put out periodic things of how they look in progress, that they were conceptual. So if it's going to create more issue than it does answers, that would be a problem. But I think if it's conceptual and there's no, as Bill was saying, there's no elevation, it's just a picture of what it could possibly look like as a footprint with some explanations, you know, I don't see the harm in that. So conceptual would be the big thing. And in my eyes, that it is subject to change, i.e. elevations or things like that. So that's kind of where I am.
Thank you, Scott. Melanie?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of tend to be the same way. I mean, I know everybody's really curious, but this is an extremely heated topic, and I'm afraid of putting information out without the forum, of being able to answer questions appropriately and cause a bunch of drama that isn't needed. I'd like to be able to have some sort of forum in place that we can have a town hall and a discussion and why certain things are there or are not there and the process that went into determining those features.
Thank you, Melanie. Bill?
Again, I think until we're ready to answer the questions and something like a town hall meeting where they can have that interchange that would indeed be transparent. Right now, you're going to put it out. People are going to misunderstand what's on some drawings, and they're going to be asking a lot of questions that we cannot answer. And then they're going to say we didn't tell them exactly the truth. So I think waiting 2 weeks, getting a firmer plan from the architect, knowing what we're going to do, and then having a town hall meeting so people, even if we have to do a GoToMeeting or a Zoom meeting where people can log in and see what we're doing, would be a better way.
Thank you, Bill. Kathy?
Yeah, I agree with Bill. I think we need to have a better idea because it'll raise more questions and dovetail the release of the information with a plan to have a town hall meeting to answer questions and relay additional information to appease some of the concerns and share the information as we know it.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. So the consensus is to hold for now, and we'll look for the committee to advise further.
Okay, thank you. And next we have the Taylor Morrison litigation, and that would be Ron, right? Ron Spooner?
Yes.
You have the floor.
Yes. This will be brief. Our committee still continues to communicate and work up these claims. And other than that, there are no significant updates.
Okay, thank you. And last, the capital improvement projects. Al Roper, please.
I guess basically everybody can see what's going on or what's not going on. Out at the dog park, the parking lot is poured, leveled. We have the landscaping done. We're waiting on tropical fence. I was told that the permit went through the planning department, and they were waiting for the zoning department to do their share of the permit. When I contacted Tropical Fence today for an update, they said that the fencing project for the dog park is in their scheduling department. So I kind of assume that it went through the Cape Coral permitting, and that's probably complete at this point. And so Tropical Fence would be putting that fence up, whenever they're ready. At the tennis court, we've had several delays. One was they had to make a custom concrete box to go extremely deep in the hole in the ground. There's a 48-inch diameter concrete culvert that connects the tennis court lake to the clubhouse lake. It is extremely deep. They pumped all the water out. You saw there was a huge pump there pumping for 3 days. They got in and dug down. They did mount the concrete box onto that concrete culvert. However, there was an error in the fabrication of that concrete box. It was 4 feet shorter than it's supposed to be. So we are once again waiting for a concrete box to be manufactured. That could be any day now. As soon as that is on site, it should be just a few days of piping again. Then they will lay the base layer and then pave it. Then they will stripe both parking lots at the same time and put in the car bumpers. That's all I have.
Good job, thank you. And last, we have the sunshade. So, Scott, that would be you, is it?
That's correct.
All right, Scott.
Okay, so as everyone probably has seen, the sunshade has been fully installed. We are just awaiting the virus to allow us to use that. We did a final walkthrough last week with the manufacturer, and everything had met or exceeded our expectations. It did not infringe on any areas outside of the perimeter walkway. In the areas that we had to remove a paver or two were replaced, the sod was replaced, the molded mesh backing were replaced. And we did get our inspection from the city. It passed all the city requirements for concrete footers and the elevation and all safety aspects. So once this coronavirus has passed us, our amenities are open. Hopefully the children of Sandoval will be able to enjoy that amenity.
Great, thank you. All right, and next on the agenda is the new business, the current coronavirus initiatives.
Yes, so in your memo, I elaborated that we have 3 subtopics: amenities, deed restriction, and collections. And I'll introduce them one at a time. So we'll fully go through the first one before we go to the second one. And then I'll go and make sure everybody has an opportunity to comment. The first one are amenities. And as everybody realizes, we have a current initiative to where we have closed our amenities until April 30th, and then we would make another decision moving forward. So I think up for discussion now, there has been some talk about or homeowners requesting to open up specifically the dog park. I've heard a lot of requests for that, and there has been mention that the justification is that Cape Coral has opened up a couple of their parks. And then we also have, of course, all of our other amenities, the basketball, the volleyball, bocce, et cetera, and of course the swimming pool and the clubhouse. So I think on the table is what we want to do moving forward. Do we want to take it day by day? Do we want to make another initiative until further notice, for instance? But we would like to hear everybody's comments on this before we even entertain any type of a motion. So with that said, why don't we start with Scott DeFilippis. Scott, what are your thoughts on the amenities initiative we have now?
At first, I'd like to say, to the board members and to the residents listening, from the first inception of the coronavirus, this board took bold steps to alleviate any possible infection within the community, and I commend the board for doing that. As soon as we closed down our amenities, we did take a little heat, but within a day or two, the city of Cape Coral was closing down their pool. The state was following with a lot of things. So once again, we were ahead of the curve here in my thought process behind closing things down was for the safety of the community, but also for the slim chance that somebody may have contracted coronavirus through something that we didn't do proactively and boldly, may have issued a lawsuit against us. And as we know, we had a 500% increase in our insurance costs because of law against the community and the HOA. So again, I think we were very proactive, and I still believe we are being proactive. But today I just got a bunch of information in from Office of Emergency Management and the Department of Health with figures statewide, and then look at Lee County's figures. I get those figures, and I believe the prudent thing to do at this point would be to, on a limited basis, reopen both dog parks. And the caveat to that would be social distancing at 6 feet and no more than 10 people in the dog park per time, because we also have the constraint still of no greater than a 10-person gathering. And I would also include Calypso Park to be open, but the tiki huts would not be able to be used. My thought process behind that is because if somebody uses the tiki huts, we have no way, HOA, decontaminate or sanitize the benches at the tiki hut or any of the cooking things. So if somebody wants to walk, Calypso Park, I think it should be open. Dog parks should be open with those caveats, and again, with possibly some time constraints at this point. I believe the data that I'm seeing, I believe Florida is way ahead of the rest of the country in what we have done in taking bold measures. So I don't think we would be in that much of a significant increase in making people. I believe the areas that I would see opening up right now.
Scott, thank you. I do have one question on the 10-person maximum. Would you suggest that that is not actively enforced, but we're asking the owners to self-enforce?
No, I would really like to believe they would. But again, we did have signs. You put signs on the dog park that it was closed, and we did put a padlock on it. And obviously, people had breached that and willfully disregarded the sign. So I would hope that the majority of the folks will follow the rules, but obviously there's one or two that can't, and that still troubles me.
Okay. Melanie, would you like to comment?
Yeah, sure. I feel that we should follow what the city does. I know we were ahead of the curve and that we closed down before a lot of other places started to, but like Scott said, we quickly saw them follow suit. I think in this instance, that was probably my only thing that I thought back and said, maybe we should have just watched what the city did and followed them as well. So my vote would be to see when the city decides to open up their dog parks, their pool, and their tennis courts and amenities and stuff like that, and then reevaluate at that time if it's prudent to do so.
Al Roper. Thank you, Melanie. Al Roper.
Yeah, I guess I would have no problem opening up the dog parks and possibly including the disc golf that is at Calypso Park. That's usually, 2 or 3 people doing that at any given time. The esplanades are open, the benches are open. So I guess at this point, I don't see a problem with opening the dog parks. The rest of the amenities, I agree with previous speakers in that I think we should mirror what is done by the city of Cape Coral.
Thank you, Al. Ron Spooner.
I know we've heard a lot about Lee County opening parks, but it's my understanding essentially what they're doing is opening trails, not the actual parks, not the lavatories, not the dog parks, just basically the trails. So with that in mind, I think that allowing Calypso to be open would be in line with that. My concern is if we have large congregations in the dog parks. I'd really like to hear some how we resolve that before we just blindly go forward and say, okay, we're not going to follow Lee County's lead and we're going to open the dog parks. How do we deal with the large number of people congregating in the dog park? Other than that, I think with regard to the other amenities, I would continue to keep them closed down until we get further indications from Lee County and the state saying that it's safe to open them up.
Thank you, Ron. Bill Tubb?
I'm pretty well like the rest. The county, as I understand it, has only opened trails. They have not opened dog parks, swimming pools, ballparks, anything where people could congregate. So I'm proud we were ahead of the curve in closing down for safety. I do not want to be the Georgia of homeowners associations and be ahead of the curve in opening them back up. So I would agree we should wait till we see the lead from the county, and then we can call an emergency meeting of the board and make a decision at that time when they take the lead.
Thank you, Bill. Don Wells?
Yes, I am in favor of opening the dog parks because I think the dogs need some exercise as well as the people, and I think you have to have a meeting with the dog owners that go to those parks and explain what the restrictions would be. And I think America has certainly rallied around the restrictions that have been imposed so far: the masks, the social distancing, the self-quarantining. And if those dog owners would adhere to a 10-person rule, a 6-foot distance, I think they should be afforded the opportunity to take their dogs there. Regarding Calypso, people are sitting in the tiki huts. I'd like to clarify that as no food or no dinners or things like that at in a tiki hut. But if you're walking around the park and they're sitting under the tiki hut at 6-foot distancing, I see that as okay. And very possibly some kind of signage at the dog park, if we do decide to do that, letting these people know that the one area where contamination can occur is the handling of the gate. And I would highly recommend that they disinfect or use a glove or something when they open the gate, because that would be a point of contact where a spread could occur.
Thank you, Don. Kathy?
All right. So, we took reasonable and our efforts were to protect the residents. At this time in Cape Coral, there are no parks, pools, or playgrounds open other than the golf course, and then Seahawk Park are the only two open in Cape Coral. I think we should wait and see what the Cape Coral does and mirror their efforts. As far as the dog park, I understand the reason why people want it open. I just think it's going to be a very difficult thing to enforce. I would rather wait and see what the Cape does next week.
Okay, I believe the consensus is to not open up the dog parks, but to allow users to use Calypso Park and as a quasi-extension of walking trails, if you will, the Esplanade. So if that is, with that being the consensus, I would like someone to make a motion to open up Calypso Park for, we'll call it pedestrian use.
Can somebody make a motion?
Ron Spooner, would you like to make that motion, or do you want to modify that motion?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm fully in support of opening up Calypso Park.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay, Bill Tubb seconded it after Ron Spooner's motion. Do we have all in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
How about discussion?
In a moment. Oh, excuse me. You're right, Bill. Discussion.
Ron made the motion,
Okay,
so he goes first.
let me go down the list for discussion. Scott, would you like to add discussion?
I would just like to, there was question about how do we police the dog parks, and I guess the same question would be also, how are we going to police Calypso Park also? So, that being said, I truly would rely either way on the Calypso Park or the dog parks for people to self-police. I would hate to be, to say that, the park would be open from dusk till dawn, and now we're going to have security going in there and making sure that people are following the rules and regs. One thing that I want everybody to know is, I've been acutely aware of what's going on. I've attended a lot of meetings remotely with the city and the county. And with Corona, the city of Cape Coral took the position from day one. Mayor Coviello went to a Lee County Commissioners meeting and asked asked the county to close the county down because the Cape didn't want to make that decision, because if they had to go into an emergency operations, they would have to call in all this overtime. So it appears to me that the city of Cape Coral is not making their own decision. They are allowing the county and or the state and dovetailing off of them. So I wouldn't wait and hold your breath to see what the city's going to do. They're going to be taking their marching orders, I think, from the county and looking to see what they're doing. So again, I truly believe with the statistics that I see that the dog park and Calypso should be open. But if we're only going to do Calypso, then let's do Calypso.
Thank you, Scott.
Point of order, Jerry. When a person makes a motion, they have the first option to discuss. The seconding person has second, and then you go around the other people.
Thank you, Bill. Ron Spooner, do you have discussion?
Just other than I fully support opening up Calypso Park, I see that's consistent with Lee County opening up the parks, the trails in the parks. And I certainly think it would be positive for people to utilize Calypso at this point.
Thank you, Ron. Bill, do you have discussion point?
I'm in the same position that I'm happy with, because people have been walking around Calypso Park all along anyway, so I don't see that we're doing anything different than what we've been doing for the last 2 weeks. So I'm in favor of opening Calypso Park for pedestrians.
Thank you, Bill. Melanie, do you have discussion point?
Yeah, I guess my question is aside from the gate around the park, what is the difference between Calypso and the dog park? Does anybody feel that Calypso is safer than what the dog park would be? Is it? Well, I guess I'm not understanding the difference between opening just Calypso versus Calypso and the dog park.
Right. This is Jerry. I do have an observation there, and I believe in my experience and observations over the past year and a half, that the dog parks, and it's great that they are, but it's a very social environment with the homeowners. And it's awesome that these dog owners befriend each other and have, a small group that get to know each other and whatnot, but it is heavy socializing. Now, does that mean that it's impossible for them to socially distance? No, I'm not saying that. But if you're asking me the difference between Calypso and the dog parks, it would be the tendency at the dog parks for socializing, whereas at Calypso, I don't see that as often. And does anybody else have anything to say on the differences between Calypso and the dog park other than that? Okay, Melanie, if you would like to continue your discussion, if you have any other.
No, I'm.
Okay.
No, I'm good.
Thank you. Al?
This is Ron.
Yes, Ron.
Ron, can I just clarify a point too? In my original statement, I am not per se against opening up the dog park. What I want to hear is what the HOA would do in terms of enforcing social distance, or how they would react to a lack of social distancing. I would like to hear some sort of plan in place. You could expound upon that a bit.
Yes, I would say that the HOA would rely on self-enforcement. I do not believe we have the resources or the mechanisms to consistently, during the hours of operation, enforce that. I would think we would almost have to have an employee at the dog park in order to enforce that while the dog park is open. Now, it is, I would add that it is conceivable that if the momentum was to open the dog park, we do have some available staff until the pool opens that could do that on a part-time basis. So, if the board would likes that idea of staffing it, I can come up with some hours of operation after speaking with part-time staff, and then get back with the board and then the community pretty quickly. Within a couple of days, I think we could have that wrapped up. What do you think about that, Ron?
I think that's a very good idea, frankly. I certainly understand that owners with pets are anxious to be able to utilize the dog parks. They are outside. And I do understand that Lee County has not allowed that. But if we do have that ability to enforce some social distancing, I think that's a viable option in my mind.
Scott.
This is Melanie.
Okay, go ahead, Melanie, please.
Sorry. Yeah, I would just agree. I mean, if we have the opportunity to be able to enforce it or highly recommend, or, obviously we want our residents to self-police, but I don't really see a big difference between the opening Calypso and not allowing the dog park to be open, especially if we have the potential for staff to be able to encourage the social distancing that would be needed.
Okay, so now I would like to, before we make a motion, have the discussion centered on the concept of using pool attendants to monitor the dog, and I say dog park singular. There would have to be we wouldn't have enough staff to open both of them, but I think the homeowners would appreciate at least opening one, and we could look at perhaps having half the time one and half the time the other one. But I would like discussion to be centered on having pool attendants monitor the dog park until such time as the swimming pool opens, and at that time, obviously, the dog park would be open with no issues. So Scott, let's just go down the list, and Scott, what are your ideas on that?
Time out, Terry. We've got a motion on the floor to open Calypso Park for pedestrian only.
Correct.
You've moved into another subject. I think we should call the question on Calypso, then we can talk about another motion.
Okay, so let's.
Or is Ron willing to amend his motion to include the dog parks with Calypso?
Ron, are you so inclined to amend that?
Well, I think we're unanimous so far on Calypso, so why don't we just put that one to rest so we can focus on the dog park. I don't see it being a big deal having two separate motions, so why don't we just call the question?
Okay, well, if that's the case, then I think we're ready to vote on Calypso Park being open. And with that, I'll ask for an all in favor, say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Now, this is Don. I'd like to make a motion that we open the dog parks for the owners to be able to utilize that and to exercise adequate social distancing.
Thank you, Don. Do we have a second?
I'll second that. This is Melanie.
Melanie Palmer seconds. Discussion. As Bill pointed out, we'll start with Don.
Okay, I just think that, we've watched some governors that gotten into some hot water by over-policing and over restricting people. I think that, everyone's aware that social distancing is the norm. Masks are the norm in many cases. And to monitor that is getting to be a little bit too much, in my opinion.
Thank you, Don. Melanie, discussion?
I guess I just don't really see if we have the staff, why we wouldn't have them go by and just encourage people, make sure that, you know, we are, I mean, I'm not saying like we're the Gestapo or something to forcing people, but we have the staff, why wouldn't we do it? Why wouldn't we, you know, remind people if we see it's not being adhered to? And I just think if we have the staff, we could.
Thank you, Melanie. Scott DeFilippis?
I think, you know, as we've been talking about this, here's what I'm thinking of. We're going to open up Calypso. I think we need to put hours of operation. I think dusk to dawn is way too long. Same thing with the dog parks. I think as an initial opening, I think we should restrict hours and maybe do an 8 to 10, a 12 to 2, and a 4 to 6. And with the caveat, as Don had said, you know, social distancing, no more than 10, masks. And, you know, it is up to us as an HOA. If we find people breaking the rules, listen, we're going to shut it back down. If you can't follow a simple rule, then we're going to shut it down. So if you abuse the privilege, I don't want to see us be on the hook for a lawsuit because we, did something and somebody was infected. So I think if we put hours of operation and stipulate those criteria, and if they're being followed, that we will shut it down until further notice.
I appreciate that, and I'll comment on the hours. It would be very difficult to get someone to come in for 2 hours, go home for 2 hours, and come back. And the staff usually has, if they're not working a certain day, they usually have other commitments. I will keep that in consideration and do the best job I can. But I think the window we're going to be looking at is 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Doesn't mean we have to, you know, open it for those exact hours, but that's the window that I know I have availability. But
okay, and I wasn't thinking of having staff police it. I was relying on the honor system here for our residents. But if we're going to do an 8 to 4 with staff, I don't have a problem with that.
Thank you.
That doesn't allow a working homeowner to go take their dog at the park once they get home if you stop it at 4 o'clock.
All right.
Yeah, I think the issue is going to end up being staff coverage because all of our pool attendants, except for one, have families, and I think the commitment that they made to work for Sandoval did not include that. That's my inclination. I need to speak to the staff, and I'll certainly do the best I can. For instance, you know, if I've got one staff member that I'm thinking of now that probably can work an evening, well, maybe we can split it up. A couple of days a week, we do it in the evening, you know, and I think we can probably appease everybody. You know, we're probably only looking, I guess, you know, 2 to 4 weeks, hopefully, before we can open up without staff there. So I don't think it's a long term. I think homeowners would appreciate pretty much anything that we could do. So that said, Al Roper, do you have any discussion on this?
Yeah, I guess I would like to see it on the honor system. You know, if it doesn't work, we can always slap that lock back on the gate. You know, we can certainly have pool attendants go by and check, and you know, it's not like they have to sit there and like a lifeguard and police the place. I think they can drive by, and if they see a group of 4 or 5 people not social distancing, they can stop their vehicle. They can walk in there and say, "Excuse me, you know, if we're going to keep this dog park open, we need to stay 6 feet apart." And you know, if they have to do that, you know, 2 or 3 times, then we'll revisit it and say, "Hey, it didn't work. We made a mistake. We need to lock it back up." That's the way I would like to go. And the dog people pretty much have certain times that they go. You know, I know at the North Dog Park, I believe it's 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon is when they would congregate. So those, you know, that's basically the only time that there's more than, you know, 2 to 4 people with their dogs at the park.
Thank you, Al. Bill, Tubb?
Well, it's been my experience that the dog parks are used from 4 to 7 p.m. So I think you need to shift the time a little bit to get the most of the people using it. I don't have a whole lot of faith in the honor system. I don't think you see the honor system being used on the Esplanade now, but que sera, sera.
Thank you, Bill. Kathy?
If we do open the dog park, I think it needs to be more than the 8 to 4. I agree. It's the afternoon. I live in Phase 3, so it's the afternoon where people are in there. If we limit the hours to like periods in the morning, 8 to 10, and then 12 to 2 and 4 to 6, you're narrowing the time, and with that limitation, you'll have more people showing up, and then we have to hold it to 10 people, not more than 10. So the self-policing, we'll give it a try. Again, if we lay out all the stipulations that Scott addressed, I think, we can give it a try and clearly indicate that if it's not adhered to, we're going to shut it back down.
Okay, well, I believe that.
I have one comment.
I haven't had a chance to comment yet.
Okay, let's let Don Wells go first, and then Ron will follow with you after Don.
This is a short comment. We have the global security here, and they canvass the entire perimeter of the community, and that can be added to their list of things to be checking on.
Absolutely.
And they're there 8 o'clock at night.
I would agree with that. Ron Spooner?
Good point, Don.
I would say first off, we limit the hours, shorten the hours. That's going to be a greater concentration of people in there. So I think that's a bad idea, frankly. I think if we open them up, I think we shouldn't be shortening the hours. That would give people the best chance to social distance. And in terms of monitoring, I don't think that we should have attendant standing there. I think that we should have someone basically driving by, whether it's security, and when security's not there, any pool attendants, just to make sure that there aren't any issues. But frankly, I don't see them having to sit there and babysit people. I just think it's more of a being aware of what's going on in the areas and see how it's working.
Thank you. So the consensus is, I believe, to open up the dog park, the motion is to open up the dog park. Motion was made by Don and seconded by Melanie. And from a logistical standpoint, I believe 12 noon to 8 p.m. is doable. Those are the hours currently for security. And so we can have security drive by and monitor that. And then if there are folks that are not obeying the rules and aren't following security's guidance, then we can revisit it. So with that said, and discussion complete, well, before we take the final vote, is there any further discussion after what I've just said? Okay, so let's take the final vote. All in favor for opening the dog parks? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, the second sub-point was deed restriction enforcement. And the primary reason for the suspension of deed restriction enforcement had to do with fining people that were losing their jobs. And quite honestly, when this began, 2 or 3 weeks ago, it was getting serious. People were worried about life and death situations and losing jobs, et cetera. The other caveat is that if we're performing deed restriction enforcement, we also have to fine people, and we also have to, by law, offer them a hearing. And we are just not situated with the coronavirus and the distancing issues to have to hold efficient hearings in the manner we do. So what I'm suggesting that we do is to continue until such time that the staff works on site. Until that time, continue doing what we're doing, which is monitoring deed restrictions, egregious ones, meaning we still get emails and we still get phone calls, several times a week, reporting deed restriction violations. And there are some that are, egregious, whether it's a boat parked for multiple days, an RV, someone parked in the grass. I think you guys get the idea of if it's a huge eyesore and something that needs to be handled, we've been handling those. And the primary way we've been doing it is point-to-point contact with that homeowner. And when we're doing deed restrictions in general in the community, there's just too many homeowners to have that point-to-point contact. But in this environment, with only doing the egregious ones, we are able to do it, and we found so far it's been effective. So what my recommendation is to do is to continue handling the egregious deed restrictions, keeping things at bay until such time we have staff working here and we can have those hearings for people that have been fined. So before we even make a motion, which we might not need to make, I would like to go down the list of board members and see what your feelings are on that. So we'll start with Scott DeFilippis.
I'm in favor of continuing the policy that's in effect right now, if in fact it is working for us.
Thank you, Scott. Melanie Palmer.
Melanie?
Yep, I think there's some things that we can definitely probably address. I mean, I want to be sensitive to major expenses and stuff that people may not be able to adhere to, but I mean, people can be cutting grass and stuff like that.
Right.
So if major things are being addressed, I'm okay.
Thank you, Melanie. Al Roper.
I'm good with it.
Thank you, Al. Ron Spooner.
I'm not clear on what you said. It seems to me that you said that we're focusing on the egregious issues out there, but yet there's no patrol trying to identify those egregious issues. It sounded to me that you simply said that if someone calls and complains, our deed restriction person will go and evaluate it. But we've basically completely abandoned the deed restriction program and just let this neighborhood go. Am I incorrect here?
No, I think you're hearing that correct. So I would characterize it as reactive, and I can tell you that on egregious violations, we do get phone calls and emails on them consistently. So it is reactive, and I would say, as for characterizing letting the community go, yes, I think we would probably be doing this for a few more weeks. It's, anyone's guess at this point, but it seems like we're getting closer and closer to being able to come back and get to some form of normalcy where we could have staff on site and do those inspections. And perhaps if we did make a consensus on this, if you would like to revisit it at 2 weeks, because I understand your concerns. Clearly I do. And perhaps that might make a difference if you knew that, well, okay, fine, if it's, we'll look at it for a couple more weeks, but then after that, I think we might be closer to reopening and being able to continue with staff on site having those hearings. I don't know if that would make a difference to you.
But why isn't staff on site identifying the egregious issues, being proactively looking, going down the streets, identifying any issues rather than relying on residents to complain about other residents? To me, that doesn't sound very effective. It doesn't sound very consistent. And I don't understand from a social distancing standpoint why an employee can't drive up and down the street and do their job.
We can absolutely do that. I'm just saying that if the employee has 200 to 300 violations, we cannot fine for those because we can't have a hearing. So, but getting back to the original point, if you're suggesting why can't we have an employee drive to proactively look for egregious violations, I agree with you, and I can make that change.
Well, a majority of deed restriction enforcement is not fining. It's educating and interacting, and you can with the residents, and you can interact with the residents via email, telephone, and many residents appreciate it. About 4 or 5 years ago, I got a letter, and my response was, "Thank you. You know what? I didn't see that." And I think the consistent quality of our community deserves to have a person there working to maintain that. And I don't see how this has any issue to do with social distancing.
Okay. Again, if you're asking me to continue the deed restriction enforcement program as approved, it would include. I mean, we just simply don't have the time to interact with 200 or 300 residents in a 2-week period. But so what our program consists of is sending letters, and it starts out obviously with a friendly reminder. Depending on the issue, if it's an egregious matter, then we start out with the first formal letter. But then their second time we go by, if it's still there, it is a fine. And we're talking, if there's 3 or 4 violations, by that time they're looking at $3,000 to $4,000 in fines. And then of course we have to have the hearing. We've been looking at between 20 and 30 people on the docket for the hearing, and I just think doing that virtually it's possible, but it would not be efficient and it would be challenging. Doesn't mean we can, if we were looking at having to socially distance and not come back to work for, a month or 2 or 3, well then I think we would probably go and find a way to make that virtually more efficient. But I think by the time we gained our efficiencies, we're probably already going to be back at work, is my guess. So, and that's where I was thinking maybe, certainly we could revisit this issue. So what I would suggest then, I would rephrase my suggestion that I originally made, and I would suggest that rather than continuing and being reactive on egregious violations, I think to have someone out in the community and interact with residents regarding egregious violations would be appropriate, and then continue on that path until such time the staff is on site and can get back into their normal routine of enforcement and hearings.
So I think that's a start from my perspective. I just don't understand the all or nothing. I think there's a lot that still can be done, and in prior deed restriction employees we've had, they've told me they've emphasized on quality communication with residents and education, and it seems to me that's the best route, and we have a real good opportunity here. Maybe we don't get 300, but doesn't mean we give up altogether.
I agree, and I would commit to you to work as aggressively as we can with this without having to go into the letters and finding and hearing process. So I think you've made some valid points, and I think this is somewhat of a middle ground, if you will. Bill Tubb.
I don't understand why, again, to use Ron's term, it's all or nothing. Seems to me like, I understand what you're saying. We can't have a hearing where we put too many people in the room to proceed with that. But I don't understand why we can't have an employee documenting things, preparing the letters, and hold them and mail them out after we're back to normal operations.
Well, the reason of that is because if an employee goes out today and sees a violation and he holds it for 3 or 4 weeks, he's going to have to go out and again and look at it to make sure it's still there, because it could easily have been cured. The best practices is once you see a violation, that within 48 hours get that letter out for that reason. Otherwise, a high percentage of people cure the problem, and there's a high level of frustration in getting a letter saying something is wrong when they had fixed it a week or 2 earlier. But I don't think we're in an all or nothing. I think the initial suggestion was that, but I think the renewed suggestion is not all or nothing. I think it's having someone proactively go out into the community and look for egregious violations and interact with owners on those violations.
Well, I'm uncomfortable with not having a definition of what an egregious violation is. And I think in normal process, in the normal time, if our employee went out, saw a violation, we sent out a letter, the homeowner called back and said, I've cured it, he still has to go back and inspect it to see that it's been cured. So how's that different than going back to seeing that it still exists before we mail out the letter?
Well, they don't go back to see if it's cured. They keep on a routine. Just because an owner says that, I mean, we would be chasing our tail because a lot of owners think that they've cured something, they haven't. So what we do is we keep on a cycle of looking at every home every 2 weeks is the goal. And so regardless of whether an owner calls us and tells us whether they fixed it or not, you know, we still go back to that home on schedule. We don't get off schedule and go back that day or whatever, if you will. So it is looked at, but on our routine cycle of going by that house.
Well, how then would it be different than the employee identifying a violation today? We get back to normal operations in 3 weeks, and in that 2 week cycle, he goes back, sees it is still there. And if it is, his paperwork's done and his letter's ready to go out.
Just change the date.
Yeah. Well, so what you're suggesting is go by, see the violation, send a letter out saying you've got 10 days to cure. 2 weeks later is our cycle.
That is not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm saying you go out, you see the violation, you identify it, document it, but you don't do anything about it until we're back to normal operations. Then you, in your 2 week cycle, you go back, see if it's still there. If it is, you have the paperwork ready to send a letter at that time.
Yeah. I just think that I don't quite honestly see the benefit in that, because if you go back a second time, even if it was your very first time to go, 2 weeks later, you're still going to see the same violation anyway. You wouldn't have needed to have had that record from 2 weeks ago, because even if you never went on the first day, say you wait until the 15th day to go, whether you went 15 days ago or whether this was your first time out, the violation's going to be there or not, and then you write it up accordingly. It would make, you would have no benefit to have seen it 2 weeks earlier if you hadn't sent a letter. It's just really, I think there's some, benefit in being proactive, but I just don't, I think you would end up writing up, I think probably 80% or more of the write-ups you have would probably be there in 2 week time anyway. So I just wouldn't see the purpose of going twice. You just would go once, write it up, and send a letter 2 weeks later.
I think if people know you're looking, they'd be less likely to let it go.
Well, maybe so, but if they know I'm not fining you and there's no retribution, because I can't right now, then I'm not sure how effective that would be. But again, on the more egregious things, and egregious isn't relative, I agree. But I'm talking sore thumbs things to where typically 17 years of experience, I get a phone call saying, "Oh my God, Jerry, you're not going to believe this. There's a boat out there," or "This guy's parked in his front yard," or I just, it's hard to even come off the top of my head. But egregious things that are sore thumb items that are more out of the routine. Perhaps you could characterize it as your top 5%. Of the worst things in the community. Those might be characterized as egregious loosely. But, quite honestly, if someone calls, even if it's not really egregious, and if someone calls on a violation or emails us, we're still going to go out and inspect it anyway. We don't just say no. But generally speaking, the ones that are emailed in and called in are, just by happenstance, the more egregious ones. That's why I pretty much referred it to it as that way. I see the desire, but I'm telling you what I think that we can do to be effective during this period without fining and without hearings. I do have some other matters that I think would help this discussion, but they're more personnel matters that I could talk one-on-one with you and Ron about that I think would appease you. Along these lines, but again, it would be more preparation and getting ready for when we do, so we can hit the ground running, essentially. And I think each of you might know what I'm referring to is getting that prepared for that day. I think we can do some work in that regard, and as well as the daily runs through the community for the more egregious violations.
Well, no need to beat a dead horse. Get your consensus and let's go where the consensus is.
Don, thank you, Bill. Don, do you have a comment?
Well, I think that we've got personnel. I think we got people that are on the payroll, and I think if there's things that they can do to keep deed restriction a viable program, it would be positive.
Thank you, Don. Kathy?
I think we can also, as Ron was saying, the need to educate. I think it might be helpful if we communicate to the residents what we're seeing is some of the top violations and better definition. I know the garbage cans on Vareo is, people are always yelling about that. So, typically, what are the violations that are being issued? Whether it's roofs and it's, whatever all.
Okay.
I think if we give them, like, these are the top 20, and maybe suggestions how to make improvements, and then take a period, this downtime, as maybe like an informed compliance approach.
Okay.
And that once we go back into normal operations, whatever that may be and whenever that may be, we hit the ground running and we start enforcing.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, well, I don't believe that I think the consensus is to continue. However, instead of being strictly reactive, I think we're going to add proactive measures into our enforcement on egregious items. And I'm also committing to Ron specifically and Bill specifically to work towards preparing hard for when we open up normal business operations to be able to hit the ground running. And as such, no motion or board vote would be necessary, as we're not changing anything with policy. The last item I had on the agenda was fining and late fees, collection of late fees for HOA assessments. And what I suggest, recommending that we do, is have any requests be on a case-by-case basis, and allow Bill Tubb to serve as my liaison for those, meaning if anybody has a request to waive a late fee, normally my answer is no, but you can always approach the board of directors on these cases to facilitate a quicker answer, and also to facilitate using coronavirus in regards to the answer. I think that I will bring those to Bill, and together Bill and I can make a decision on those on a case-by-case basis. And I don't know, I think it would be relative to this discussion to let you know that we've had a total of 3 homeowners enter onto a payment plan as a direct result of the coronavirus. So with that, I'd like to go down the list, the line of board members, see if there's any comments on the idea of deciding those on a case-by-case basis with Bill and I. Don Wells, you have a comment on that?
I'm comfortable. I think that if a person is definitely lost their job, that we need to be accommodating and show some leniency in those situations once verified.
Thank you, Don. Bill Tubb?
I think your discussion was vague. I think you're talking only on current late fees, correct? Not someone who has
current late fees.
$2,000 late fees outstanding.
That is correct. Current late fees.
If you're talking current only, I have no problems with that.
Thank you, Bill. Ron Spooner?
I'd agree with that, with the caveat current.
Thank you, Ron. Al Roper?
I agree with it as long as Bill's good with it.
Thank you, Al. Melanie Palmer?
Yeah, I agree. I guess my only question would be, is there consistent criteria being used across all residents? So is there some sort of guidelines or measurements that you're using consistently with any resident that comes up, so it doesn't appear to be a personal issue at any time?
Yeah, what I can do is draft some criteria and run them by Bill, and Bill and I can get a consensus for that direct reason, because I agree with you. It's better to have some written guidelines that we can use to maintain that consistency in our decisions. Scott DeFilippis.
I'm in agreement with that, and I thank you, Bill, for taking on another task.
Thank you, Scott. Kathy?
Yeah, I concur as well. It's reasonable.
Okay. Awesome. That's a consensus. No board vote is necessary. Next.
Next on the agenda, we have the new business, and this is the General Manager Liaison.
Yes, and I put this on the agenda in reaction to Ron Spooner, I believe, wanted to elaborate a little more on this. Ron, do you have something to discuss regarding this general manager agenda item?
Yeah, I think, going back to deed restriction as an example, I don't know who you communicated with or if anybody in terms of just suspending deed restriction, but it wasn't a decision that I was involved in. And I think when we have different individual discussions with different board members without a consensus, that's very messy. Sometimes when we have multiple directions coming from that are inconsistent coming from multiple board members, that's a bit messy and hard to follow. I think there should be some organization here, and that I think there should be a board liaison to the GM, and it's up to that liaison to make sure there is communication with the rest of the board members and they deliver a clear and consistent message. And we're not talking policy decisions that are made based on a board meeting. We're talking about some more basic direction. And so rather than having three different board members come with three different opinions, I think it would be best to organize things and make a GM liaison.
All right. Do you have a specific motion in mind? Or did you want the board just to discuss this concept? Or how did you see us moving forward?
I would like to hear everyone's input on it. That's just, like I said, that was my reasoning, but it's just one board member's reasoning, so I'd like to hear what everyone else thinks.
Don Wells?
I think a position of that is valuable. I think it's been my experience, since we've been in the coronavirus lockdown, that I don't think there's been a lot of communication, and some things have gone on that were a surprise to me, which I was totally not aware of and found out through the back door, and I don't think that's good. And we need to know what's going on, and the board, all members, need to then be adequately appraised.
Thank you, Don. Bill Tubb?
I agree that my perception of that position is that their responsibility would be to, and I know it's illegal to poll the board, but to inform every board member of what the position is that you're taking, and that everyone is then aware of what's going on. Then the board can call them a special meeting if they want to override it, but still they're aware of it. It is not a surprise at the next board meeting.
Good point. Al Roper?
I agree with what both Ron and Don have put forward. On this deed restriction, I actually went up to Don and I asked him. I said, "Hey, did I miss something? When did we stop doing the deed restrictions?" And he said, "I didn't know anything about it." That's not a comfortable position to be in. So I would definitely be in favor of having a GM liaison to the board.
Thank you, Al. Melanie Palmer?
I agree. I agree with everybody else and their reasons.
Thank you, Melanie. Scott DeFilippis?
I am in favor of the position.
Thank you, Scott. Ron, do you have a specific motion, perhaps for someone in particular to serve in that role?
No, I do not. It was purely a concept I wanted to present, and I will defer to to anyone else who wants to make a motion.
In the silence of that, is there anyone that would like to volunteer for that role?
I'm open to doing it,
Awesome.
but by no means does it have to be me.
Is there anyone else that's interested in filling that role? All right, would someone like to make a motion appointing Ron Spooner as the GM liaison?
This is Scott. I'll make that motion, appointing Ron Spooner as the GM liaison.
Thank you, Scott. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Al. Do we have discussion? Scott?
No, I'd just like to thank Ron again for stepping up to take on another task. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Scott.
Al, would you like to add to discussion?
Just second what Scott just said.
Thank you. Melanie, do you have discussion?
Nope, thank you.
Ron Spooner, do you have any further discussion?
Nope.
Bill Tubb, do you have any discussion points?
I have nothing further.
Thank you. Don Wells, do you have discussion points?
No, I think it's an excellent idea, and I appreciate Ron stepping into the position.
Thank you, Don. And
Thank you, Don.
Kathy, do you have discussion points?
No, I concur with the motion.
Thank you. So the motion on the table by Scott was to appoint Ron Spooner as the GM liaison. That motion was seconded by Al Roper. So now we'll call for all in favor. Say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Hey, motion passes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And next on the agenda, we have the topic of access gates.
Okay, so we had a late memo come that I emailed to everybody prior to the meeting, so you would have in front of you. I am going to read the first memo and then characterize the second one, and then let Don Wells, who was the author of the second memo that went out today, elaborate a little. So for the purposes of educating the viewers, my memo states, Board, as some of you may be aware, we've had a bad gate operator at the Veterans Gate entry, not allowing I call it an iron gate, it's really aluminum, but the gate to operate. The gate is currently in the open position with the barrier arm operational. We have three options to resolve. Key to the resolution is a long-term desire to transform all of our two gate systems into one gate systems, as was installed at Pine Island and most recently at the Trafalgar exit. Transitioning to a one gate system saves us the cost of one gate operator per entry or exit, as a one gate system only requires one gate operator rather than two. So the three options plus one are one, build two new single gates for veterans and install single gate systems on both the resident and guest entries. Use the two new, we have purchased them in August of 19, the two new operators that are currently on the resident entry, one for a single resident gate and one for the single guest rate. Those brand new gates, and it would be $8,900. Second option, convert the two gate system on veterans, guest, and resident to a one gate by welding them together. Perform the same conversion as listed above, $5,800. 3, replace the two older operators on the guest entry at veterans with new operators. This would allow a total of 4 new operators, the 2 in August plus these two new ones now. These 4 new operators could later be used to convert all entry gates at Trafalgar and veterans to one gate systems. Total there is $5,500. And I did add that Bose Electric does not recommend bolting the veterans gates together. The reason is the gates are mismatched in size and would leave a significant gap and would be off center. And I'm recommending option 2, which would provide professionally welded and refurbished gates at both entrances at Veteran. The new one-gate system installations would mimic Pine Island as it relates to operability. Aesthetically, they will be finished with paint, however, not powder-coated. Wanted to make that caveat. That $5,800 cost of the project would be paid through with reserves. If option 2 is not desired, then I would go to option 1. The project will be conducted by Bose Electric. Prior work by Bose has been bid, and their pricing remains in line with previous proposals. My reasoning for wanting to move forward is due to the security-related nature of this project, as well as the lengthy time it will take gaining additional progress due to the coronavirus. The reserve schedule calls for $37,528 to be spent on gates and operators in 2021. We have already spent $5386.56 for 2 new operators at the Veterans Entry. That was that August one, which will be used in this conversion project. So this will reduce the remaining amount left to be spent on gates and operators to $26,000, which is more than enough to convert Trafalgar this year or next year or when needed. Not included in this request, I will be gaining proposals to clean up the Veterans Gate areas in areas such as pavers, rust paint, traffic lane bars. The goal is for the Veterans Gate area to be rejuvenated to like new condition as it relates to operability and aesthetics. And on a side note, Envera has agreed to replace all the mechanics on all of our gates, basically at Trafalgar and Veterans, that are rusted with brand new parts. Also, Megan, our maintenance technician, is starting on Monday with restriping the gated entry areas. So we're getting a little bit of a head start on that. Then I wanted to add that Don Wells created a spreadsheet using the costs I gathered for gate options. He did a great job demonstrating extended costs for all gates, not just Veterans. And I asked you to use this in correspondence with page 10, which is where we're at right now. Don's comments that he will elaborate on. Well, I'll just turn this over to Don to let him talk about his analysis and his points.
Okay, I want to clarify the funding source first. And on the reserve study, there's $37,528 in 2021. That includes gate operators, and it also includes swing arm operators. So that means that this money has to cover us for not only the iron gate operators, but also the barrier arm operators as well. So the 37,000 is spread over more than just the iron gate issue. Our problem at the gates was our operator area, the operator themselves. And the iron gate issue came into being because of the single gate operation system that was at Pine Island. But I might add, to give us a little historical background, Taylor Morrison was supposed to create the gate at Pine Island to mimic exactly what was at Trafalgar, and that didn't happen. They went to the one gate system so that they didn't have to have 2 operators. They didn't put the magnetic gate bar because the other operator with the belt was cheaper. And so, you know, they created a gate system that, you know, certainly functional, certainly works well. There's some very positive things with a single gate system, and it seems to have worked pretty well. But the history to why that's a single gate and the others are double is the other 2 gates, the iron gates, were done by Bonita Bay. So with that being said, we're at a point to determining what we need to do to solve the problem at Veterans where we've got operators that are non-functional. And I would point out that options 2 and options 4, I think that Bose Electric was the one that talked Taylor Morrison into the single gate system and also not using the magnetic gate system. So I think there's a vendor bias and prejudice here a little bit. Options 2, which is welding, and options 4, which is bolting, The reason given for not wanting the bolting also applies to the welding. I mean, there's a space that's approximately 8 inches between the two gates that would be closed. So the space that between the gate and the post on the side would be 8 inches larger. And if the gates are mismatched in size, if you weld them together, they're still going to be mismatched in size. So in evaluating the two ways of putting the gates together, I think options 2 and 4 have the same problems. I would say that if there ever was an accident, something got bent, if one of those gates was bent, it bolted together, you could take it apart. You would only have to replace one part of it, and I think we do have some spares in that regard. Ron has some concerns that there's some of the gates are, some of the verticals are bent, and you know, that's something that we need to weigh in on our discussion that we're having here. I think my feeling is that we have an expert on the board that deals with mechanical things, gates, and I think he needs to weigh in and give us his opinion, which is not a vendor's opinion that's trying to sell us something, as to which of the options he feel would be most appropriate for us here, and to also at the same time maybe inspect the gates and to see if there's how much bent, and if those bent verticals can be straightened, or what his opinion of the condition of the existing gates would be. And I'm talking about Al Roper.
Well, I don't know that I'm an expert, but I guess one of the questions that I would have is exactly if we're going to be having Bose weld these together, what are we going to be getting for our $5,800? Are they going to be totally refurbishing these gates? In other words, straightening all the bent prongs? Are they going to be cutting off the excess hinges that are on the opposite end? Are they going to be, regrinding that down and then painting it? Are they going to be putting new hinges in? We've had problems with hinges breaking before. So those are some things that before I could make a decision, I would need to know exactly what Bose is going to do, and also if Bose is going to stand behind it. If Bose is going to weld these together, and 2 weeks down the road something happens, a hinge breaks or a weld breaks or something, are they going to put a 6-month warranty on it, a 1-year warranty? I would assume that the brand new gates that we're going to be paying $8,900 a piece for, they're going to be perfectly straight and they're going to be really shiny, but we're going to be paying a lot more money for them. And what type of guarantee do we get on those also? And I guess I haven't heard any of that information, which is very important.
I anticipated that question. Actually, yesterday I called Steve, and he told me 1-year warranty on paint. And the proposal that he wrote based on our conversation was professionally fabricate and join and finish resident and guest entry gates at veterans. Proposal includes removal and reinstalling of existing gates and the 2 older operators, conversion of existing dual swing gates, and installation of operators and equipment. We will also refurbish existing posts to match the new paint finish. And again, he told me the 1-year warranty on the paint. So, he obviously says he told me from an aesthetic standpoint, it's his goal and his anticipation that they will look new. But the only caveat that he told me was that the Pine Island gates, or the new gates you buy, are powder coated, and these are not, which looks a little bit better in my opinion, and also lasts longer. But there again, we have a 1-year warranty on the paint. So
the only thing that's warranted is the paint?
That's correct.
Okay.
I don't know what else there would be.
Does it include straightening the aluminum?
Yes.
Does it include removing the old brackets?
Yes.
There were a number of things that Al meticulously mentioned.
And what if you're interested, if the board is interested in this, he has verbally told me yes, but what I wouldn't mind is getting an approval contingent on these, confirming these items in writing. And so, but I've been verbally told yes.
How about Al having a conversation with Steve Hayden so that, you know, they're talking one-on-one and we don't lose anything in the interpretation?
Yep, I like that too. More the better.
Yeah, I'd be glad to do that. You know, the only other thing, I think option 3, just to replace what we have, I would not be in favor of that at all. I think we need to go from a 2-gate system to a single-gate system. We would cut the price in half by bolting them together, but then you're not getting a totally refurbished gate.
And the welding includes, for that gap, it includes a fabricated bridge, so it would look good aesthetically and not just have a large gap. And you can talk to him more about that as well.
All right, this is Scott. That was my main concern. Thank you, Jerry, because we know we have an 8-inch gap. I was out there today, and I figured it doesn't matter if we bolt them together or weld them together on one end towards the pillar, we're still going to have an 8-inch gap where a less than hefty criminal could squeeze through there. So you just addressed that, and that was my main concern, that void would be filled with some material.
Yep. Okay.
Is there a reason he has not included an option to powder coat and weld rather than just paint and weld?
Well, I think if they powder coat it, I know they're going to have to take them off site to do it. And also the cost associated, you might as well just go ahead and buy the new gates if you're at that cost. I think that's what he didn't think it would be economically viable or feasible.
I'd rather see the number.
So the welding is going to be done on site?
Correct. The welding will be done on site.
Well, I thought they would be taking them away and straightening and welding and painting and just making them, refurbished. If it's done on site, then I'm not sure you're going to get the straightening that Ron's looking for.
Well, he is telling me from an aesthetic standpoint, they will be straight.
Aluminum's pretty easy to work with.
So
then I'd recommend Al have a conversation with Steve and report back to us with his findings.
all right, and then perhaps we can do a unanimous consent in lieu of a meeting on that. I just don't want to wait until the next board meeting to get these repairs.
I'm not 100% sold in just fixing the ones that we have. I think they're older, and I don't especially think they look good even welded together. They're very heavy, slow moving. I mean, the Pine Island gate is far more efficient in the way that it's designed, and we haven't had nearly the issues we've experienced with the other gates.
I concur with Melanie. I think from a consistency standpoint, the Pine Island gate should be the model, their operability and the aesthetics. The only issue I've heard with the Pine Island gates is that they're missing the pineapple, the logo for Sandoval. But they're highly functional and efficient. And I think that's the model we should be looking to replicate.
Well, that's definitely something to consider because, that's the first thing anybody that comes to Sandoval sees is our gates. So, if that's representing us, we want it to look pretty good. But, if we can save $8,000 or something and they refurbish the existing ones so that they look new, that's a different story. But I kind of doubt that that's what'll happen.
That's really what I want to hear, Al. I want to hear that we're actually going to get what's being promised, and I would trust your assessment here a lot rather than the vendor?
If we were to go with option one, what would be the source of funding since we only have 37,000 in reserves for that?
Well, we could go with option one just at veterans for $8,000.
So this isn't 1, 2, or 3. This could be a part of 1 and a part of 2.
No, if you look on my proposal first, but before, I think Don had just extended it out to all the gates. But if you look at the original proposal, it was $8,900 to do what Melanie had just cited.
Okay, you didn't send out the original proposal today, did you?
I'm sorry?
I didn't get the original proposal with today's email.
No, it was sent to you yesterday with the board pack. It's page.
Well, what about the veterans exit gates?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, that's again, I mean, if you want to go ahead and do the other gates as well, I think that's why I appreciated you extending that out. But again, if we're just, Bill's asking, to go to option one, how are we going to pay for it? That's what I was telling him, is that option one for veterans only is $8,900.
Could we get a better price if we did the exit and the entrance at the same time?
Surely we would, but what that is, I don't know. We haven't negotiated it, but yeah, you would think.
And one other comment I'd like to make is that both Melanie and Kathy were talking about how efficient the gate operates at Pine Island, and that has to do with the operator,
Right,
the motor
being
that's
newer.
opening and closing them. So that should match.
Yeah, but they also look new, and they're not all dented up, and it's
Scuffed.
You can tell it was made to be one gate. It's not two gates pretending to be one. Just aesthetically, it looks better and more updated.
All right, so what are we going to do?
I think that before we make a motion, I'd like to hear from everybody. Scott, do you have any more discussion on this? Ideas?
I do not.
Ron, do you have anything to add?
No.
Bill Tubb?
I'm trying to make sense of jumping between Don's spreadsheet and your board pack because I can't look at them both at the same time.
Well, it's essentially the same thing as far as the cost. Don just extended it to include all the gates. He gave options for all different options, and then he gave costs for each gate. So if we wanted to do more than just the Veterans Gate, we could see what those costs were. But on the sheet that Don gave you, it would be option one at the very top, that $8,900. On the sheet that I gave you, it would be option one on page 10, $8,900.
Right, but you're saying we don't have to take just option one. We can take part of option one and part of option two. How do we determine that with unanimous consent?
I'm sorry that what you probably misunderstood me, and so I was not saying that you could take part of option one and part of option two.
Okay, so it is 1, 2, or 3, and that's it?
That's correct.
Okay, so then if we take option one, what will be our source of funding?
Reserves.
But we only have 37,000 in reserves.
And the cost for veterans, what's broke? So we got something that's actually broke, but then to Don's point, we have old. So I think the situation is this: we've got an immediate need, which is veterans guest entry, and so to accommodate one gate systems, we already have two gates. We would just go ahead and do both the resident entry and the guest entry at the same time, right? So that's the more immediate need, and that's $8,900 for option one. And so if we chose also to go ahead and do veterans exit, Don on his spreadsheet as a cost for that at option one, and then so forth at Trafalgar as well.
Okay.
So it just
So
depends
if we're
how
gonna
much
do-
we want to do, you know.
So you're saying we can do option one, but only do veterans, leave Trafalgar alone?
At this
And
time.
then we have
Well,
adequate
you know,
funds.
or if you chose, if you look at Don's spreadsheet, I agree with it. You could do the two exit gates for 14,000. So what would it be? 22,900, and all of veterans would be taken care of.
That's what I just said. We could do veterans and leave Trafalgar alone, and we'd have adequate funding. Is that correct?
That is correct.
The Trafalgar is a residence utilization gate, and the veterans is everybody, guests and vendors and residents. So if you're looking to make veterans your showplace, I think if you're going to do the entrance, you should at least think about the exit.
Yep. So I think what we're looking at right now is the way it seems like our discussion is going is option one, meaning new gates, and then either doing just the veterans entries for $8,900 or include the exits as well for an additional 14,000. And so obviously the reason the exits are more expensive is because we would have to purchase the operators. We already have the operators on hand and paid for the entries. That's why that's cheaper.
Okay.
Ron, can I ask your viewpoint on doing just the veterans entry for 8,900 versus doing all of it for 22,900?
I would really have to understand the necessity to do it all, frankly.
Yeah, and that's why I didn't make it as part of my proposal, is because while aesthetically we can probably, as when we walked around the gates, we saw a lot of areas to improve. I think from an aesthetic standpoint, that's the only thing it would improve, because we have operators that work. But I think, I don't know if Don meant this, but I think he probably did. These operators are old. They're going to go out soon, you know, but they're still working now. We might get another 6 months. We might get another year. Could get a year and a half out of them. And so we could save a little money.
Those timelines aren't making me feel overly optimistic, though. And if we're getting a really good price for doing them all, and you're giving me those timelines, I would tend to lean towards doing them all.
The mall being at veterans, or to include Trafalgar.
So what I would suggest is, if it's 22,900 based on the numbers that we have for just doing one, I think that was the numbers used. Perhaps we could take a motion on authorizing the association up to $20,000 to do everything, and then let. I'll be happy to use Al. Al and I can get together on a phone and get that number down as far as we can, under 20.
I'm in favor of that. I think that's a good idea.
I agree.
I concur.
Okay, so
What are your expectations, since we don't have any more gate money in reserves until 2030, that the Trafalgar gates can exist until 2030 without additional funds
we
expended
actually
on it?
have additional funds in 24.
Yeah, I read that.
Bill, all operators that we're taking out of service that we could put back in service if one of the operators at Trafalgar fails, to limp it along. If we had a money problem and waiting until funding came later. So we'll have spare operators.
Right.
Okay. And then you're confident that the Trafalgar gates, the iron gates, as you call them, are adequate to last until 2024, when we have some more reserve money to replace them?
One of them's fairly new because there was the accident and they redid those, the residence entrance. Those are fairly new.
Right. I'm looking for a yes or no answer. Are you confident they can survive until 2024 without additional funds expended on them?
Let me
I'm certainly not.
chime in on that. I think the answer would probably be no. I mean, that's sticking your neck way out there. But the issue, too, is that I think it would not be a significant impact to the overall reserve study and contribution, reserve fund, I should say, to make the adjustment to bring some of those monies earlier. I don't think that we're necessarily looking to spend any more money. I just think it's going to be the timing of it. So then I would suggest that to not be a motivating factor on what we do, but then at the next reserve update to make that adjustment to our schedule.
You'd still have 12,500
Yeah.
left in reserve if you do it, because we're not spending it all.
Right, only 22 of the 37.
Minus 20 and minus the 5 you've already spent. 55.
So what Jerry is saying, if we had some reason something happened and it just had to be done, there would not be a problem moving the $19,000 that's in the reserve study for 2024 forward to use it now.
That's what I'm saying is correct. I do not believe it would be have a significant impact on our 20-year funding schedule.
That answers my question.
So I think the motion would be to consider that I'm going to ask someone to make would be to authorize the association to contract for an amount not to exceed $20,000 for 4 new gates and 2 new operators at the Veterans Gate area.
For 4 new gates and how many new operators?
2.
2, correct.
Does anybody disagree with that potential motion? Okay, then I would ask for someone to make that motion.
This is Melanie. I'll make the motion.
Okay, Melanie, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Kathy has seconded the motion. We'll call for discussion. Melanie, any further discussion on this?
No?
Kathy, you have further discussion?
No, thank you.
Scott DeFilippis, further discussion?
No.
Al Roper?
No, I don't think anybody's going to be unhappy with brand new gates. The problem we've always been considering is, trying to save money on them. But I think this is probably, at least for veterans, this is the right move.
Good to hear.
Thank you, Al. Ron Spooner?
I agree.
Thank you, Ron. Bill Tubb?
I have no issues, but as an aside, do we have the funds to get the pineapples for Pine Island Road?
Yes, I can do that. I need to find the artwork for it, or I guess I can probably just, I just haven't looked into it yet, so I could probably get a company to come out and use one of them as a template to make more. I just don't have any more.
Good, thank
Okay.
you.
Yep. And I agree, that's a great touch.
Trafalgar's missing 1 too. There's 3 up and there's 1, or there's 2 up and 1's missing at Trafalgar as well.
And I'll probably get a couple of extra ones when we do it anyway. Okay, getting back to that motion. So discussion is, so we have a vote now, or all in favor?
I still have discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry, Don.
If that is done, you will have 8 spare gates and you will have 5 spare operators to keep Trafalgar going to 2024.
Okay, good point.
That should help.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
And we'll store them at Don's garage.
that's it.
I was thinking about yours.
Okay, I'd like to call a vote. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Good. All right, good. All right, so that was the excess gates. So next on the agenda we have standing committee selections.
Yeah, the only reason I had this on the agenda was just kind of update everybody, and I don't think there's much of an update other than what I've said in my general manager's report, just reminding everybody about the selections. And the reason being is, we don't yet know when we're going to be able to get back in this facility, and so the solicitations have asked people to submit their interest by May 1st. And so the question would be, do we make these selections virtually, or do we virtually at a month from now, or do we do it through a special board meeting, perhaps in a couple of weeks? I think that would be completely acceptable. Perhaps on the 10th, 11th, 12th, in that time frame.
Yeah.
And that meeting might only last for an hour. It'll be a special meeting just for that purpose. So perhaps I just talked myself into asking you guys for a consensus on, let me look at a calendar real quick for when a date would be that we could make those selections. Today's the 23rd, 27th, the 1st, 6, 8, 9, 10. I would suggest that perhaps either Tuesday, May 12th, or Thursday, May 14th, we have a special meeting. And I'll just go ahead and stick my neck out and say Thursday to keep consistency on the dates. On Thursday at 6 p.m. To have a special meeting to make committee selections. And then I think what the anticipation would be is that we could get the committee seated, and right before that we would open up and start having more normal opportunities to meet and have the facility open. So I'd like to hear everybody's opinion on that. So if we could go start with Scott DeFilippis.
I think it's a great idea, but that Thursday I will not be able to attend that meeting, but I will take the advice of the board on who they appoint to those committees.
Okay. Melanie, what are your thoughts?
What's the date? May 14th.
I'm good with that. Thank you.
Al, your thoughts on doing that?
I'm good with it.
Ron Spooner?
I'm good.
Thank you. Bill Tubb?
I am good with May 14th at 6 p.m.
Thank you, Bill. Don Wells?
Oh, that's fine.
Thank you. And Kathy?
I'm good.
Okay, so I would look for someone to make a motion to have a special meeting on Thursday, May 14th at 6 p.m. for the purpose of making standing committee selections. And if someone would please offer to make that motion.
I so move.
Thank you, Al. Al Roper made that motion. A second?
I'll second.
I'll second.
Okay.
I got Bill Tubb as seconding that motion. Any discussion? Al?
You're going to have the names in by May 1st, you said?
That's correct. And then I'll have that turned to you guys within, 3 or 4 days to where,
Okay.
to where the board can review.
And the candidates will select 1 or 2 committees that they would like to be on?
Yeah, so the solicitation is for people that are interested in a committee, but certainly we will get people that are interested in more than one committee, if that's what you're asking.
What is he talking about?
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
Okay.
yep. Ron Spooner, any discussion?
No, I'm good with it.
Sorry, Don Wells, discussion?
I'm good. No comments.
Kathy, any
I'm
discussion?
good.
Okay, so the vote, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passed.
All right, next on the agenda, we have the new business, under new business, social committee charter.
Can I back up just one? I had that notice actually gone out. I'm not sure that the residents got that notification. I don't think I got one.
Well,
Did the rest of the get that
yeah,
notification?
I've received quite a few. Yes, I am positive it went out. I mean,
Yeah, the
I'm getting-
Communications Committee put it out
Yeah.
on April 17th, I believe,
Yeah, that one I didn't get.
via email.
All right, you might just, I know you probably know this, but you might check your spam, and then tomorrow, you might contact Denise, because there may be some type of an issue. It's odd that you wouldn't
Yeah,
have
I've
gotten
had
it.
residents say that they didn't get a copy. That's the only reason I'm bringing that up.
Okay, well, I mentioned it tonight, and I
Only
will ask
myself.
Denise to resend.
And it was posted on the,
Okay.
I think it was posted on the Sandoval page.
It is, yeah. Yeah, it's also on the Sandoval Facebook page, Don.
Okay, I just know that there's some residents don't think that they've gotten that. So
Okay.
I think a second publication wouldn't hurt.
Okay, I'll ask her to send it out tomorrow. Thank you.
Yeah, with a note to support the community through volunteers, and it's key.
Okay, so on the Social Committee Charter, I think we're at a point where I would like to go ahead and entertain a motion, and then a second, and then we can have discussion. So if someone could make the motion to adopt the Social Committee Charter as presented.
This is Scott. I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Scott. Do we have a second?
I will second.
Okay.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, so now we're going to go to discussion. So Scott, you want to start the discussion out?
I have none.
Okay, Bill, thank you, Scott. Bill Tubb?
I have an adjustment, I think, on all the purpose, all four, well, no, not the first three of the items of the purpose. It says to assist. I would be more comfortable if it said to work with.
Or to support?
Or to support, yeah.
Okay, I like that, support. All right, any other discussion there, Bill?
No, that's all.
All right, so the next person, let's go to Don Wells.
No, I think that's good.
I've lost my notes for Melanie.
No, I'm good with it. Thank you.
Okay, we did Scott and Bill. Ron Spooner.
I'm good with it.
I'm good with it.
Thank you, Al.
And I'm good with it.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay, so we'll vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Are we voting as amended?
Yes.
As amended, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Bill.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Are we looking to do the board member assignments today, too?
Thank you. Kathy just brought up a great point, is do we want to select a board member liaison, or do we want to wait until the membership
12th.
is
the 14th.
selected? My opinion is let's wait until we select the members, is that may have a bearing on who might want or might not want to serve. If anybody opposes that, let me know. Okay, that's what we'll do.
Okay.
So going on to the next business item, it's the same. We'll look for a motion to accept the Sandoval Risk Management Committee Charter. If we could have a motion. Bill, would you mind making that motion?
I intend to move that we table this item so that the current insurance ad hoc committee can review it before we vote on it. We can hear what their thoughts are because they have not seen this yet. And this was their idea.
Okay, very good. I'm happy to do that.
And I agree with that, Bill. This is Ron.
They are currently functioning, so tabling it for one meeting would not delay anything in any.
Yeah,
And
so-
we're not tabling the committee, we're just tabling the charter.
Right.
Awesome. Okay, that's great. And so, Ron, would you second that motion?
I second it.
Thank you. Discussion, Bill, any more?
No, I've said what I had.
Ron, any further discussion on that?
No, other than we have two really talented volunteers helping us to get together all our insurance stuff, making sure that we have some real options going forward and looking at our current practices. One is Dave Nermo and Craig Schneider. They are currently working with us. We may look to expand the committee, but I really do appreciate their help, and obviously they're very, very talented.
Awesome.
Good to hear.
Any other discussion from anyone else? Okay, we'll take a vote. All in favor of Bill's motion to table this item, which was seconded by Ron Spooner?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Okay. And next we have the management company, the request for proposal, the establishment of an ad hoc committee. And this is something that we want to establish now. We learned that we know that the Pope contract was initiated August 1st, 2017 for a period of 3 years. So the end date would be August 1st, 2020. And within the contract or the agreement with Pope, a 30-day written of notice for termination is also specified. So those are the particulars regarding the current Pope. So we would look to establish a request for proposal, and this ad hoc committee would oversee that whole process, the developing and the issuance of the request for proposal, right, with future consideration and recommendations to the board for the management company contract moving forward.
Could we get a clarification from Jerry? I know the board considered an amendment to the Pope contract that would have given 90-day notice, which would mean we'd have 60 days sooner that we have to make a decision. Can we get a clarification from Jerry that it is indeed currently 30 days?
It is indeed currently 30 days.
Okay.
And I think Kathy's going to also want to solicit 3 board members.
Right. So maybe we can just go around and see the level of interest and who would like to be the board member to co-chair the ad hoc committee, looking for 3. So we'll start alphabetically.
I'll volunteer. It's Don.
Don Wells. All right. Scott DeFilippis, any interest?
No, thank you.
Melanie Palmer?
Yes, I'd be interested.
Al Roper?
Okay.
I'm sorry. No thanks?
No, thank you.
No thanks, okay.
thank you.
Ron, Bill, and myself.
No thanks.
So I'm interested. So looking at Don, Melanie, and myself is the 3 at this time.
So I think the motion might be, go ahead.
Select those.
I think the
I move we
motion,
select those 3.
I think the motion would be a motion for the association to form a management company RFP ad hoc committee with Don Wells, Melanie Palmer, and Kathy Conway serving as co-chairpersons. And if anybody would like to make that motion, that would be awesome.
So moved. So moved.
Thank you, Bill.
I second it.
Thank you, Ron.
Ron seconded it.
Bill, do you have any discussion on that further?
Since that's the only 3 that were willing to do it, I think that's it. There's enough discussion.
Ron, any further discussion?
Nope. Thank you for volunteering.
Okay.
Scott, any further discussion?
No, just thanks to the board members who stepped up.
Melanie Palmer?
Nope.
Thank you. Al Roper?
No, and thank you.
Thank you. Don Wells?
Pardon?
Do you have any discussion?
No.
Thank you,
No.
Don. And Kathy Conway?
No.
Thank you. So we're ready for a vote. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Sorry about that. Any opposed? None. Motion passes.
Okay. And now we come to the additional agenda items, a solicitation for additional.
I have one item.
Yes, Bill?
We currently have 4 board members on the Clubhouse Expansion Committee, Improvement Committee. I think we should remove 1 board member so that we do not create a quorum if they're all present.
Okay. Do you want to make a motion or?
Oh, I'm just saying that needs to be added to the agenda. Okay, I'll make a motion that we add that to the agenda, that
Okay.
we reduce the number of board liaisons to the Clubhouse Improvement Committee to 3 from our current 4.
I'm writing the motion down. Hang on just a second. Okay, do we have a second for that addition?
I'll second.
Kathy Conway seconded. Thank you. Discussion, Bill?
I think it's pretty simple. We've got 4 members, and if we show up, we've created a board quorum, and then it's a meeting, so we can only have 3 safely. And I think we should just select those 3 now and move on.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Bill.
I agree with Bill.
Thank you, Kathy. Melanie?
Melanie. Yeah. I mean, I just want to kind of start and say I joined the committee prior to being elected, with a few specific goals in mind, specifically the collecting of valid demographic information on our community, ensuring the community had an opportunity to express areas that they felt needed improvement with the clubhouse. And then I really wanted to make sure that that feedback that was captured was well represented and really inclusive of the entire community into the design as much as fiscally responsible. And personally, I think that we've been able to accomplish those goals. And although there's still a lot of work to be done, I feel like the project's moving into a new phase. And I would be happy to be able to transition out and now allow the construction side of things to really progress.
Thank you, Melanie. I think that's going to come into play with what we decide, but for the sake of the motion, can we have a vote on the motion of all in favor? Which Bill's motion is just to add this as an additional item to discuss. So can we have a vote on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yeah.
Okay, motion passes. So I don't think we would need a motion for Melanie to resign from the committee, if that's what Melanie wants to do. Does anyone disagree with that?
I do not disagree.
Okay, so Melanie, go ahead.
I would offer that I will personally take it upon myself to inform her of things that are going on in the committee in a separate email so that it won't violate our rules and she'll still be informed.
Awesome.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Okay, with that being said and no motion needed, we can move on. But Melanie, I would just ask if you would shoot me an email tomorrow on that. That'd be great.
No problem.
Thank you.
All right.
Any other? Somebody else might have an additional.
Any other additional agenda items? All right. With that said, we're adjourned.
All right, thank you. We are adjourning to open forum.
Yeah, we'll go to open forum. There's one issue, or one resident comment. Jerry's calling it up.
Thank you. Bear with me 2 seconds, guys. Okay, we do have one open forum item. It is from Todd Wen. And he says, good evening. Are we still paying full wages and benefits for all employees during this period of time when amenities and other activities are at standstill? Question mark. If we are no longer paying wages, can you share the overall savings and reduction of staffing requirements? Has Pope Properties applied for or received any PPP SBA funds to help offset these payroll costs to the HOA? Is there any indication that residents are missing HOA payments as a result of job loss, and how will that be handled? So some of these comments are obviously personnel related and sensitive, but I will say that the board has met in executive session to discuss staffing and payroll issues, and the board continues to plan to meet further in executive session to discuss employee staffing and payroll issues. The question is, has Pope Properties applied for or received any PPP SBA funds to help offset payroll costs? Pope Properties has been looking into this ever since the initiatives were announced by the government, and they don't have a conclusion yet, but they are strongly looking to it. As everyone probably realized, our employees are not employees of the association, they're employees of Pope Properties. But yes, Pope Properties is looking into that. And I believe that answers all the questions.
The last one was about the missing HOA payments. That was addressed earlier by Bill.
It was addressed
And
earlier by
you.
Bill. Yep, thank you.
3 cases.
Yep.
3 situations.
Right.
All right. With that
Okay,
said-
thank you, Todd Wynn. And with that said, I think we are dismissed.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.